In the last episode of our saga to literally debug a Canon SX520 we found out that, to our disenchantment, there must be dirt on the sensor. After watching a bunch of videos on how to tear down lenses, I guess we can start by these screws. I contacted some repair shops. None were willing to undertake the job. A new replacement lens costs more than what I paid for the camera. So it seems I have nothing to lose. Before we proceed, I need to stress that this is not a step-by-step do-it-yourself video. So if you try this with your camera, you'll be doing it at your own risk. These are all Phillips head screws, but of different sizes. So it is a good idea to store them separately and in the sequence you remove them. I am using this ice tray as an improvised compartment box. I've seen others use egg cartons. Label the screws if you are not documenting everything in video. These 3 screws here should not be touched. Their function is to both hold and align the sensor, and to realign it requires specialized equipment. So I was informed. With the proper screws removed, we need to carefully pry this latch up a little and release this flat cable from this guide. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. I am speechless. Desolation is the name of the feeling. We can see that this lens assembly has become an ant grinder. Our misfortunes with this camera are far from an end. All the way counterclockwise, and we can remove the front element. Now we need to figure out how to dismantle the rest. After some tinkering, this piece fell out on its own weight. Then I proceeded to preliminary clean the pieces already taken apart before I could go ahead. It took me days of aimless tinkering before I managed to take the main components apart. Now we can try to understand how this lens assembly works. The whole program is contained on the barrel cam, which has grooves inside and outside. What you see on paper is a sketch of the projection of their profiles. Pins, balls and studs act as cam followers, thus converting rotary motion into the linear action necessary to move the various optical elements back and forth. This is the first element integrated to the movable lens housing. It is a convex lens. The second element is concave. Then we have the aperture diaphragm. This represents the image stabilization lens that is capable of moving up and down or left to right to compensate for the camera's shake. S2 is the shutter. This lens element is here for some kind of compensation. The last element is what I presume to be the focusing lens. It moves independently, driven by its own servo motor. The barrel cam itself also moves back and forth, taking with it all the other optical elements. The inner cylinder is fixed and attached to the back plate. Now that we studied the whole mechanism, we can understand how to take apart the second lens element, the barrel cam and the inner cylinder, almost in one take. Immediately after you remove the front element, you need to remove this ring from the other side of the inner cylinder. Then you gently turn the inner cylinder clockwise. Notice that the second lens element turns along with the inner cylinder while it pops out. Keep turning the inner cylinder a little more until you feel a resistance to move any further. At which point you now grab the second lens element and pull it outwards by half a centimeter or so until you feel some resistance again. You will notice that the second lens element together with the inner cylinder will turn a little counterclockwise. This is because the groove profile at this point has an S shape. Now you will notice that the inner cylinder is free to be moved clockwise again. Soon 2 pins will show through this rectangular hole. The other 2 pins will show through individual holes on the other side of the barrel cam. You must be careful because these 2 pins are under pressure of 2 tiny little springs that have a tendency to make them fly over to the other side of your shop. Don't ask me how I know this. You carefully remove all those 4 pins and the 2 little springs. They are made of unobtainium. so please do not lose them. You keep turning the inner cylinder clockwise until you feel a resistance to go further again. Now you pull it outwards and there you have these tiny steel balls. Aren't they cute? They seem to stay in place on account of silicone grease. Now you keep on moving the inner cylinder clockwise until for the last time it stops moving. You pull the second lens element out like that. The barrel cam goes off like that and the second element is free from its cage. This is the focusing lens and this is the sensor window. It needs further cleaning but that requires a special procedure we will have to perform later. Now this servo motor turns this worm that drives the focusing lens. You can also see kind of a Maltese cross that certainly acts as an encoder together with some kind of LED and photo sensor for the motor position. I am guessing here because I am really not sure. The lens also has this tab or lip here that aligns with a groove that is apparently another sensor. If light is used here it must be infrared, as visible light would interfere with the image. That way the microcontroller will know when the lens is parked, and can use that information as a reference for the position of the lens. The same expedient seems to be used with the barrel cam. This lip here also aligns with this sensor when it is in the park position. The motor that drives the barrel cam must also have an encoder, as given away by this flat cable here. And then we have this focusing auxiliary light. Let's now have a look at the inner cylinder. It has this flat cable that comes from the main board and goes first to the leaf shutter, which is controlled by a solenoid. Then it goes up to the other side. This motor here controls the aperture diaphragm. Behind it you have the image stabilization lens. To expose it I would have to remove these screws, but I think I have already ventured too far in tearing the lens down. If you want to see a crazy bloke do it, please check out EEV blog number 849 Sony E-mount camera lens teardown. I am not using isopropyl alcohol on these plastic parts. Instead I am painstakingly using this makeup brush and this bulb blower. I noticed that the grooves have a thin coat of some kind of wax or silicone grease. We need now to clean the lenses, clean the sensor window, and try to figure out how to put the pieces of this puzzle back together. Thanks for watching. Have a good night and stay beautiful.